I'm Hannah Cole, 36 years old, and the sound that finally wakes me up to my life is a spoon slipping from my hand onto a spotless kitchen floor. The gravy I've whisked since dawn streaks across my apron, and out beyond the doorway my family lifts their glasses without waiting for me. My mother's laugh carries first, my father's voice follows, and my brother, new promotion, new car, same old center of the room, accepts the attention like he was born to it. I stand still, looking at the doorway like it's a stage I've been setting for years, without once stepping into the light. The turkey rests under its foil, the pies cool on the counter, and the timer ticks in a rhythm I know better than my own heartbeat. No one calls my name. No one asks if I'm ready. The house is warm, the table is full, and I have never felt more outside the picture. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from in the comments, and if you've ever carried a family gathering on your back, hit that like and subscribe so we can sit at this table together. I grew up in a modest ranch house on the edge of St. Augustine, the kind of place where the mailbox leaned a little and the neighbors waved from their driveways. My parents believed in hard work and clean counters. My mother taught me to fold towels into perfect thirds and to start dinner before anyone had time to be hungry. My father liked the yard line straight and the bills paid on time. On Saturdays, I measured flour for pancakes, while my brother Justin measured the arc of a baseball in the street, and my mother said each of us had our strengths, which sounded fair until one strength kept the house running and the other drew applause. We didn't have much, but the rules were clear: be useful, don't make a fuss, and remember that family comes first. I learned to bake birthday cakes from library cookbooks and to smooth over arguments before anyone noticed they'd started. By high school, I could feed 12 people with a grocery list and a stopwatch. When I moved to Orlando after college, my world widened, but my habits didn't. I found a steady job as a project manager at a mid-size marketing firm, the kind of work that rewards the person who thinks ahead and keeps a dozen small fires from catching. It fit me almost too well. I made timelines that held budgets that balanced and decks that landed contracts without my name ever getting mentioned in the room. After hours, I rolled out pie crusts in a small apartment kitchen and dropped casseroles at neighbors' doors because kindness felt easier to show than to ask for. There's a picture of me from that time propping open my front door with my hip while I carry a tray smiling like it's the most natural thing in the world to be on your way to someone else's need. The contrast came later when Justin's success arrived with the shine of glass offices and company golf outings. He sent photos from conferences and ocean views, and when he bought a small place near Clearwater, my parents drove down to help him pick paint colors like they were choosing a nursery. He was charming in ways I've never been quick with stories, quicker with names. When my parents moved into a newer beach house that they said was for all of us, the guest room I used became Hannah's room, which sounded sweet until you realized it came with a to-do list. Thanksgiving and Christmas migrated there as if holidays needed water views to count, and I took the earliest flight, grocery shopped and labeled containers so others wouldn't have to think. Justin brought a bottle of wine and jokes. Somehow, it always evened out on paper, just not in hours. If you had asked me then about family, I would have said we were close, just busy. I knew how to be proud of my brother without comparing our lives, and I made room for my parents' preferences the way you shift chairs to fit another plate. Still, small things started to collect texts that assigned me menus instead of asking photos where I appeared as an elbow behind a platter, moments where my mother said, "we," when she meant Justin, and my father toasted the one who keeps us together with his hand on my brother's shoulder. None of it was loud. Most days it would have felt petty to name, but together those pieces made a kind of silence around me that I kept filling with effort. I don't think anyone meant to make me invisible. I think we fell into a rhythm that worked for everyone else. The beach house white stone long windows, a dining table that could seat 10, became the set for our rehearsed holiday tradition. I arrived 2 days early with lists. My mother followed with centerpieces. My father decanted wine. Justin pulled up at the last minute with good intentions and a story about traffic. If there were rules, they were simple. I would make sure it all happened and everyone would enjoy it. When the day came, the house would smell of rosemary and butter. The game would hum on a television down the hall, and there would be a moment right before we sat down when I believed the doing would turn into being included. And then, as if on cue, the moment would pass. This particular Thanksgiving, the one that begins our story, had all the familiar marks my mother's cheerful group text 3 weeks out, the Just What Justin Likes list. My calendar flipped to cook time rather than work deadlines. I took the same early drive, unpacked groceries on the same cold stone counters, and set out serving spoons that belonged to my grandmother, like a quiet promise that tradition meant we all mattered. By mid-afternoon, the dishes were lined like a parade across the island. Steam rose in soft ribbons, and my hands carried one thing after another through that doorway. From the dining room came the sound of chairs scratching back and glasses being lifted. Someone my father, by the warmth in his voice, said, "To Justin, for bringing us together." And chairs settled again. I stood in the kitchen with a towel in my hand and a feeling I could not set down. I moved toward the doorway with the gravy, expecting the usual call to wait or the familiar, "We'll all sit once everything is ready." No one turned. No one checked the time against the timer I'd been trailing all day. My mother reached to straighten my brother's collar. My father poured him another splash, and my aunt angled herself closer to catch his latest story about a client who knew a celebrity I've never met. The only surface that noticed me was the counter when I set the ladle down too fast. It clicked like a small gavel against the stone, and I looked up, sensing the edge of something I couldn't name yet. I wish I could tell you I walked away then, that a single instant broke a tradition years in the making. What I did was breathe, then wipe the counter a second time, as if it mattered. But there, in that small pause, a thought I'd never allowed finally took a seat beside me. If I stop performing, will anyone notice I'm gone? I lifted the gravy boat with both hands, the silver cool and heavy, and stepped toward the threshold. On the other side of it, a word I rarely used was waiting. I stepped into the dining room with the heavy gravy boat cradled in both hands. The silver base met the table with a dull thud that cut through the hum of voices for only a heartbeat. 5 faces lifted toward me, then turned back to Justin, who was in the middle of another story about his golf game with a client. I stood at the edge of the table, waiting, half expecting someone to thank me, but the moment slid past without pause. My mother leaned closer to adjust my brother's collar, her hand resting on his shoulder as though he were the guest of honor at a banquet. "Honey," she said lightly, her eyes never leaving him, "could you grab more ice for Justin's drink?" The request floated across the table like an afterthought. My arms ached from carrying platters all afternoon, yet her words made it sound like I had nothing else to do. Something inside me refused to bend this time. No. The word left my mouth clear and sharp, louder than I meant, but steady. The conversation stalled. Justin's mouth froze half open, his fork hanging in the air. My mother blinked, her practiced smile faltering. "I'm sorry," she asked, as though she hadn't heard me right. I said no. My voice didn't shake, though my hands trembled by my sides. My father's face tightened, his jaw set, as he placed his fork on the edge of his plate. "Your brother drove all the way from Tampa," he said. 2 hours, I answered quickly. "He drove 2 hours. I've been here cooking for 2 days. The silence stretched, filled with all the years of unspoken rules I had just broken. My chest hammered each beat like it might split through my ribs. Around me, the air carried the weight of rebellion, small but irreversible. For the first time, I had pushed back. My mother let out a brittle laugh and smoothed the napkin on her lap. "Hannah's just tired from being in the kitchen all day," she explained to the table, as though translating my words into something more palatable. She turned back to my brother with an eager smile. "The turkey is wonderful this year, don't you think? Justin?" Her voice slipped smoothly over my resistance, covering it as if nothing had happened. My father leaned back, nodding at my brother's half-hearted agreement. Within seconds, the conversation swirled again around Justin's promotion, his new clients, his boat docked on the coast. My interruption was dismissed, absorbed, erased, yet the word I had spoken still echoed in my chest. I pulled out a chair, sat down without rushing back to the kitchen, and poured myself a full glass of wine. Across the table, Aunt Denise caught my eye. She didn't speak, but the faintest nod passed between us, small and quick, as though she wanted me to know she had noticed. I sipped slowly, letting the warmth spread through my chest, while their laughter resumed around me. Something had shifted, even if only I could feel it. Later, I carried the pumpkin pies into the dining room, setting them down with steady hands. "Just place them on the sideboard, dear," my mother said without glancing up. "We'll serve ourselves." I stood holding the knife, the scent of cinnamon and nutmeg rising toward me while the conversation pressed forward without space for me. "Justin, tell them about your new place?" my mother prompted, touching his arm again. He leaned back, stretching his shirt across his shoulders. "Closed last week," he said proudly. "Perfect little beach house in Siesta Key." "That sounds wonderful," my father beamed. "We should all go down together like our Key West trip." The knife slipped slightly in my grip. "What trip?" I asked before I could stop myself. My mother's laugh filled the pause. "Oh, just a quick weekend. You were so busy with work." The words stung more than she seemed to realize. "I was never invited," I said, flatly. For the first time, Justin shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but Aunt Maggie jumped in without missing a beat. "Speaking of family things," she said brightly, "Justin, I think you should take Grandma's china cabinet. It will look perfect in your new dining room." Her eyes skipped right over me. "That's generous," Justin said, his tone polite but distant. My father nodded in agreement. "Makes sense. Your mother and I helped with his down payment. With rates the way they are, it wasn't easy." The pieces fell together with startling clarity. The same parents who scolded me for buying a modest condo on my own had handed Justin a beach house with their support. "More pie, anyone?" I asked, my voice hollow, moving mechanically as I cut neat slices and set them in front of each smiling face. I remained standing as I served, listening to them praise his new boat, his clients, his weekend plans. Each word pressed against me like a reminder. I was useful when carrying plates invisible, when seated uninvited, when joy was shared. My father's toast had named Justin as the one who brought us together, though I had been the one stitching these gatherings into place for decades. The room blurred around me, but I kept my hand steady, pouring coffee, replacing napkins, refilling water. My mother's voice called again. "Hannah, could you bring more napkins?" Justin spilled a little gravy. I nodded, turning quickly before anyone saw the tears rising behind my eyes. As I passed Aunt Denise, her hand reached out under the table, brushing mine. "I see you," she whispered softly, barely above the hum of conversation. I clutched that single moment, small, but enough to keep me upright. In the kitchen, the coffee pot hissed and sputtered. I leaned against the counter, listening as their laughter carried through the doorway. My hands tightened around the tray of cups, waiting to be carried back. The question surfaced in my mind before I could quiet it if I stopped. If I refused again, would they even notice I set the cups in neat rows, straightened my shoulders, and stepped back toward the dining room? The night wasn't over, and the weight of my silence pressed hard, but somewhere deep inside, the word I had spoken once already was still alive. It beat quietly steady as a drum, waiting for its turn again. The quiet after Thanksgiving lingered longer than usual. My family's group text, which had buzzed nonstop in the weeks leading up to the holiday, went silent for almost 3 weeks. Then, one Sunday afternoon, my phone lit up with a familiar notification. Exciting news, my mother had written. "Justin will be hosting Christmas at his new beach house." I stared at the screen, waiting for more. The follow-up arrived moments later, a list of dishes assigned directly to me. Stuffing cranberry relish puff pastry appetizers, and the chocolate pecan pie my brother apparently missed. At the bottom she added, "Come early to help set up. Maybe around 9, Justin has a breakfast meeting with a client." I read her words twice, then dropped the phone onto the couch. The expectation was clear. While my brother entertained, I would take my usual place in the kitchen. That night, sleep refused to come. The ceiling of my condo seemed to press down with the weight of the holiday ahead. By morning, a dull ache stretched across my temples. At work the following day, Harold stopped at the entrance of my cubicle, his expression heavier than usual. "Hannah, did you finish the Henderson pitch?" His tone made it less a question than a reminder. I turned quickly from my screen, minimizing the Christmas shopping page I'd been scrolling. "I'm working on it now," I said, steady but too quick. His brows drew together. It was due Friday. The client meeting is tomorrow. His disappointment landed heavier than anger might have. "This isn't like you," he added before walking away. The words stung because they were true. I had never missed a deadline, not once. That night, sleep again slipped away. The red numbers on my clock read past 3 in the morning when I finally gave up and padded to the bathroom for antacids. My stomach burned from the inside out. I pulled a notebook from the drawer in my nightstand, opened it to a blank page, and wrote 3 words across the top: things I want. The pen hovered over the paper waiting. Minutes passed, and the page stayed empty. The thought hit me quietly. I had no idea what to write. By Thursday, the exhaustion sat so deep in my body, it felt like an anchor. Still, I walked into the office earlier than usual. I finished the Henderson pitch before noon, then moved on to next week's projects. When Harold stopped by later, I straightened in my chair and said, "I've completed everything due this week. I'm taking Friday off." The words sounded foreign even to me. His eyes widened slightly. "Of course," he said. "You've got the time. Everything okay?" I nodded. "Just taking care of myself." That afternoon, Tessa from accounting leaned against the wall of my cubicle. "A few of us are getting together Saturday night. Holiday gathering, no family drama allowed. You should come." I hesitated, half forming an excuse. "I've got so much to do before Christmas at Justin's," I murmured. She nudged my shoulder playfully. "One night won't ruin anything. Trust me." Something about the ease of her voice cracked open a tightness inside me. A laugh bubbled out, the first in weeks. "What kind of gathering?" I asked. "Food friends, bad karaoke. Dave from IT does a dance routine to Total Eclipse of the Heart. You don't want to miss that." Her grin widened. "Come on, say yes." I found myself nodding. "Okay, I'll be there." Friday came, and for once I didn't spend it buried in groceries or recipe testing. I let the day unfold slowly. I walked outside, lingered over coffee, read a book without checking my phone. That night, sleep came easily. Saturday evening, I stood in Tessa's apartment, surrounded by twinkling lights and mismatched plates. Someone passed me a plate of cookies, another handed me a glass of wine. When Dave launched into his infamous routine, I laughed so hard tears filled my eyes. For a few hours, I felt lighter, as though the weight of my family's expectations couldn't reach me there. Sunday night, the phone rang. My mother's name lit up the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but pressed accept. "Hannah," she said, her tone brisk. "I'm finalizing Christmas plans. Did you get my message about coming early to help Justin set up?" My knuckles whitened around the phone. "I'm busy too," I said quietly. "I have my own life and career." Silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, her voice returned tight with disapproval. "What's that supposed to mean?" I answered carefully. "It means exactly what I said. I have deadlines, responsibilities, commitments of my own. I'm not just waiting to be useful for Justin." "This is Christmas," she said sharply. "Family comes first." My breath steadied before I spoke again. "Does it? Because it seems like Justin comes first and I'm just expected to serve him." Her sharp inhale filled the pause. "That's not fair. He works hard." My voice rose before I could stop it. "So do I, but no one has ever acknowledged it. No one has ever asked what I need." The words hung between us, raw and unfiltered. Her voice softened, fragile now. "We've always been a close family. I don't understand where this is coming from." Something shifted inside me then. "I'll think about Christmas," I said calmly. "I'll let you know what I decide." Before she could answer, I ended the call. The next morning, I arrived at work early again. Tessa set a cup of coffee on my desk with a smile. "Thought you might need this," she said simply. No strings attached, no expectations. Later at lunch, Eric leaned over. "A bunch of us are doing an orphan Christmas. Potluck, everyone brings what they like. You're welcome to join." His words caught me off guard. People who barely knew me were offering me a choice. That evening, I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to my parents and Justin. My fingers moved across the keys steadily. I explained my decision not with anger, but with clarity. Years of lopsided expectations, the strain it placed on my health and my work, and the need to step back this year. I read it twice before pressing send. An hour later, my phone rang. Aunt Denise's name appeared. "Your mother called me," she said quickly, her tone gentle. "She's upset." My heart sank. "I'm sorry if she dragged you into this." "Don't be," Denise replied softly. "I wanted you to know I support you whatever you decide about Christmas. It's long overdue." Her words steadied me like an anchor in the storm. After we hung up, I sat quietly in the dim light of my condo. For the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like space room for something new to take root. The morning after Aunt Denise's call, I woke with a strange lightness in my chest. My email was sent, my thoughts laid bare, and there was no taking it back. Instead of panic, I felt a calm I couldn't remember having before. At work, Harold passed my desk with a nod, not a hint of disapproval in his face. I kept my head clear, my projects current, and by lunch the tension in my shoulders had eased. Later that day, Tessa appeared with another coffee. She slid it across my desk. "No cream, just how you like it," she said. "Simple kindness, no hidden expectation." "Thanks," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. She leaned against the cubicle wall. "So what are your plans for the holidays?" I hesitated before answering. "I don't know yet. Maybe not with my family this year." Her brows lifted, but she didn't push. "Well, you've got options," she said. "Don't forget that." That week, Eric stopped by during lunch. "A bunch of us are still doing that potluck for Christmas. Open invite," he reminded me. "No pressure, just bring something you actually enjoy making." His tone was casual, yet it caught me off guard. People outside my family were offering me space, not demands. I nodded. "I'll keep that in mind." By Thursday evening, I sat at my kitchen counter with my laptop open, drafting again. This time, the words came steady, without hesitation. I explained my decision clearly, years of carrying gatherings alone, the toll on my health and work, and my need to step back. I read it twice, then sent it. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was liberating. An hour later, my phone buzzed. "Aunt Denise again. Your mother called me," she said quickly. "She's upset." My stomach tightened, but Denise's voice softened. I told her it was long overdue. "Whatever you decide, I support you." I closed my eyes, letting her words steady me. "Thank you," I whispered. That weekend, Tessa showed up at my condo with takeout cartons stacked in her arms. She kicked the door closed behind her. "Operation Freedom. Christmas," she announced, spreading food across my coffee table. "Pad thai, extra spring rolls." I laughed, shaking my head. "You're ridiculous." She flipped her laptop open. "Look at this," she said, scrolling through pictures of hotels on the coast. "Key West still has vacancies. Imagine Christmas on the beach instead of stuck in the kitchen." She spun the screen toward me, turquoise waters and palm trees filling the glow. I leaned closer. "They'd never understand." She shrugged. "That's not the point. Your happiness doesn't need their permission." My phone buzzed again. This time, Aunt Denise's name appeared. "I heard you're skipping Justin's big Christmas," she said, her tone lighter than before. "Your mother called me to talk sense into you." I braced for more pressure, but Denise continued. "I told her I'm visiting you instead, if you'll have me." My breath caught. "Really? Really?" she said firmly. "I've had enough of Justin's show-off parties. We can start our own traditions." That night, I booked a Key West reservation for the days after Denise's visit. For the first time, Christmas stretched ahead like an open road, not a duty. A few days later, my phone rang with my father's name on the screen. I hadn't heard his voice directly in years. "Hannah," he said, slow and hesitant, "your mother tells me you might not be joining us this year." Before I could respond, another message buzzed in a text from Justin. "Are you really not coming?" Dad cleared his throat. "Your mother hoped you'd meet her for coffee, talk things through." His tone wasn't sharp, just uncertain. "I'll think about it," I told him. The following week, I met my mother at a cafe decorated with twinkling lights and paper snowflakes. She had brought a worn leather photo album, setting it on the table between us like an unspoken argument. "This isn't just about Christmas dinner," she said, flipping to a page with Justin's school picture. Her finger traced the outline of his face. "It's about family obligations. Your brother asked specifically for your cranberry relish." Her voice dropped lower. "You know your father and I won't be around forever." She looked up, her eyes wet. "Are you really willing to throw it all away over jealousy?" Her words stung, but I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder of my own. I brought something too. I laid 2 photos side by side on the table. One from last Easter, Justin in the center, while I stood at the edge carrying food. Another from Thanksgiving, Justin raising a toast while I poured water in the background. Then I slid forward a handwritten list. 32 gatherings where I cooked, set up, and cleaned. 4 birthdays of mine that were rescheduled because of Justin's plans. My mother's face tightened. We appreciate everything you do. I shook my head gently. You appreciate what I provide. There's a difference. I tapped the list. When was the last time anyone took a picture of me enjoying a holiday? When did anyone offer to help in the kitchen? When did my birthday matter as much as his promotion? She shifted, glancing at the people around us as though searching for a distraction. I'm not throwing away family, I said quietly. I'm refusing to be the servant. For once, she had no reply. The cafe's holiday music played softly, filling the silence. I reached into my bag once more and slid my phone across the table, the hotel confirmation glowing on the screen. I'm spending Christmas in Key West this year, with friends who see me as more than what I provide. Her face paled. You've already booked it. Yes, I answered. Jessica and I leave Christmas Eve morning. She gripped her coffee cup until her knuckles whitened. But what about Justin's dinner? She asked, her voice caught between disbelief and confusion. Justin has 2 hands, I replied evenly. He can figure it out. The bill arrived and I took it before she could reach for her purse. This one's on me, I said, placing my card on the tray. No strings attached. We stood and I touched her arm gently. When you're ready to have a daughter instead of a helper, I'll be here. She nodded once her movements stiff and walked out into the December air. Through the cafe window, I watched her sit in her car, staring straight ahead, not starting the engine. For the first time, the silence between us was not mine to fill. The cafe meeting with my mother lingered in my mind for days. Her silence, her hands clenched around that coffee cup, the way she stared at my hotel confirmation, it all hung in the air long after she walked away. I had spoken my truth plainly, and there was no taking it back. At night, as I folded clothes into a suitcase, the hum of resolve carried through the quiet of my condo. When Christmas week arrived, messages from the family group chat piled up, though none were directed at me. Aunt Maggie asked who was bringing extra folding chairs. My mother reminded everyone about coordinating table settings. Not once did my name appear, not even in a sideways mention. It was as though I had been erased. Still, Aunt Denise sent her own texts, light-hearted and steady. I'll bring dessert when I visit, she wrote. Something simple, no recipes that take 2 days. The evening before Christmas Eve, I heard my phone vibrate against the counter. Justin's name flashed on the screen. Are you really not coming? The text read. A second bubble appeared almost instantly. Mom's upset. Just 1 day, Hannah, please. I stared at the words but didn't answer. Instead, I powered off my phone, sliding it into the side pocket of my suitcase. On Christmas Eve morning, Tessa pulled up in front of my building. She leaned on the horn twice, smiling from behind the wheel of her car. Ready, she called out as I climbed in. The trunk was already loaded with beach bags and a cooler. More than ready, I said, settling into the seat. The drive south stretched out beneath a bright sky, the highway lined with palms. For the first time in years, Christmas felt like an escape, not an obligation. We reached Key West by late afternoon. The air carried the salt of the ocean, warm and heavy. Our small boutique hotel had a porch draped in string lights. Inside the lobby smelled faintly of citrus. After checking in, Tessa and I carried our bags upstairs, laughter echoing down the hallway. That evening, we walked to the beach with 2 folding chairs and cups of wine. The sun dipped low, painting the water in streaks of gold. Beside us, strangers toasted with plastic cups, some wearing Santa hats. Tessa nudged me. This beats a kitchen full of dirty dishes, doesn't it? I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It does. Christmas morning began with the sound of gulls outside our window. Tessa insisted we head to the beach early. We spread out towels, the sand still cool underfoot. Soon, Eric appeared with 2 friends from work, each carrying paper bags of food. They settled in beside us, passing around pastries and coffee. "Merry Christmas," Eric said, handing me a croissant. "Glad you made it." We spent the afternoon walking through narrow streets lined with pastel houses. Musicians played on corners, families biked past with baskets full of groceries, and every porch seemed wrapped in ribbons. That night we gathered at a small restaurant off Duval Street. Theo, one of Eric's friends, raised his glass. "To making holidays our own," he said. The words settled deep, a quiet affirmation. Later, back at the hotel, I stretched out on the bed, listening to the muffled laughter drifting up from the street. My phone rested on the nightstand, dark and silent. For once there was no vibration, no demand pulling me away from the present. Meanwhile, back home, things were unfolding differently. Aunt Denise called me 2 days later, her voice carrying a mix of amusement and disbelief. "You should have seen them," she said. "Justin burned the turkey your father refused catering, and your mother nearly cried over store-bought rolls." I sat up straighter, pressing the phone to my ear. "What happened?" Denise laughed. "They realized finally how much you always did. The kitchen was chaos without you." As she spoke, a strange relief spread through me. My absence hadn't just been noted, it had forced them to face what I had carried for years. I didn't gloat, didn't smile at their struggle. But for the first time, I felt the weight shift from my shoulders to theirs. When I returned home after the trip, my condo felt different. Lighter somehow. I unpacked slowly, stacking clean clothes in drawers and setting a framed photo from Key West on the mantel. In it, Tessa and I stood barefoot in the sand, our hair tangled from the wind, smiles unforced. A week later, my phone buzzed with a message from my father. It was brief, only 4 words. "We need to talk." I read it twice, then set the phone down without replying right away. For years, my family had spoken at me, not to me. Now the choice of when and how to respond belonged to me alone. The message from my father stayed on my phone unread a second time, though the words were burned into memory. "We need to talk." In the days that followed, I waited for the group chat to flare up, but it remained oddly quiet. No reminders about shopping lists, no panicked calls for extra serving spoons. The silence felt unfamiliar, like a house with all the lights turned off. On Christmas Day, I woke to sunlight spilling through gauzy curtains, instead of the shrill alarm I usually set for roasting schedules. Tessa was already out on the balcony sipping coffee, her hair pulled into a loose knot. "Merry Christmas," she called softly. I joined her, the air warm and salted the streets below, dotted with bicycles instead of traffic. For the first time, I didn't feel the tug of someone else's agenda. We spent the morning with Eric, Theo, and a handful of others who had gathered in town. The potluck took shape on a picnic table near the beach, pastries, fruit, and a few dishes that had no holiday theme at all. Someone had brought fried chicken from a local place. We passed plates back and forth, sharing without ceremony. The laughter that rose around me was easy, unforced. When the plates were cleared, Theo leaned back in his chair. "This feels right," he said simply, and I found myself nodding. That evening, we wandered down Duval Street, where lights draped across balconies swayed in the breeze. Musicians played guitars on corners, their cases open for tips. Tourists mingled with locals, and every doorway seemed to spill warmth into the street. Tessa turned to me as we paused to watch a brass band. "Remember last year?" she asked. I thought of the clatter of pans, the ache in my feet, the voices calling from the dining room. The contrast was too sharp to name. When we returned to the hotel, my phone blinked with missed calls. 3 from my mother, 2 from Justin, and 1 from my father. I set it face down on the nightstand, the glow hidden, and pulled the covers tight around me. For once, I let the calls pass unanswered. The day after Christmas, Aunt Denise called. "You should have seen it," she said, her voice half amused, half exasperated. "Justin tried to carve the turkey and nearly dropped it on the floor. Your father refused to order catering, so your mother attempted stuffing. It came out burnt on one side, undercooked on the other." I pictured the scene clearly, the flurry of voices, the smoke alarm blaring, my mother's anxious hand fluttering at her necklace. "What did they do?" I asked quietly. Denise chuckled. "They made do. But the truth is, they were lost without you." Her words landed heavier than she might have intended. My absence hadn't just created inconvenience, it had revealed the gap my labor had always filled. They had noticed. The very silence of the group chat was proof of that. 2 days later, a text arrived from my father. "Your mother and I would like to see you when you're back. Coffee, maybe." I read it twice before sliding the phone into my bag. The idea of them asking instead of telling was new, strange. I didn't respond right away. When I returned home from Key West, the condo felt steady, a quiet contrast to the whirlwind I had left behind. I unpacked slowly, setting a framed photo from the beach on the mantel. In it, Tessa and I stood barefoot in the sand, our smiles wide and unguarded. That evening, as I made tea, my phone buzzed again, this time with a short message from Justin. "We can't believe you didn't come," Mom cried. "Dad's upset. Why did you do this to us?" I set the phone down, my hands steady. For years I had folded myself into the spaces they left me, hoping to belong. Now, standing in my own kitchen, I realized I didn't need to explain the choice to step away. They had felt it. That was enough. A week later, I agreed to meet my parents. We chose a small diner halfway between my condo and their house, a place with cracked leather booths and the smell of coffee that never quite fades. They were already seated when I walked in, my mother smoothing her napkin, my father's hands clasped on the table. "Hannah," my father began, his voice softer than I remembered. "We missed you," my mother added quickly. "Christmas wasn't the same without you." I took a slow breath before answering. It wasn't supposed to be the same. That's the point. Their eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not dismissal, but uncertainty. The conversation stretched on my parents, circling back to tradition, to family, to what they felt was lost. Each time I reminded them of what I had carried, the years of meals prepared and hours spent unseen. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't waver. And for the first time, they had no simple reply. As I left the diner, the sky gray with the promise of rain, my phone buzzed again, another message from Justin. "Mom's really upset. Can't you just come for one day next year?" I stared at the screen, then slipped the phone into my coat pocket without typing a word. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was space. And in that space, I could feel the balance shifting. By the time the next Thanksgiving rolled around, the air in my condo smelled of rosemary and garlic instead of stress. A turkey roasted quietly in the oven, its timer blinking a steady countdown. My living room had been rearranged with mismatched chairs, extra cushions pulled from closets, and a long folding table covered with a plain cloth. It wasn't polished, but it was warm. Jessica stirred potatoes at the stove, while Theo carried in bowls from the counter. Aunt Denise arrived balancing 2 pies, brushing the November chill from her coat as she stepped inside. "This beats Justin's formal dinners already," she said with a grin, setting the desserts down. I handed her a glass of wine and sank into the sofa beside her. "No place cards, no centerpieces," I said. "Just people who want to be here." She squeezed my hand, her eyes kind. "That's more than enough." When we finally sat down, plates were passed around the table instead of delivered by one person standing. The sound of overlapping voices filled the room, no single story dominating. I spooned mashed potatoes onto my own plate and tasted them while still hot, something I hadn't done in years. Across the table, Theo raised his glass. "To new traditions," he said. The others echoed him, glasses lifted high. For the first time, I felt the holiday settling into me instead of through me. Later, as the dishes were stacked loosely on the counter, Denise leaned close. "Your father called me yesterday," she whispered. I paused, waiting. "He asked if you were hosting this year. They wanted to know if they should come." Her voice softened. I told him I didn't know, but that things were different now. I nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. After everyone left that night, I stood in the quiet of my living room, looking at the photo we had taken, 5 smiling faces, mine in the center this time. The table behind us was cluttered with plates and half-empty glasses, evidence of a meal shared together. I hung the picture on the wall, adjusting it until it sat level. 2 weeks later, my phone lit up with my father's name. I answered with steady hands. "Hannah." He said, his voice older somehow. "Your mother and I were wondering if we could visit for Christmas." I let the silence stretch before replying. "I'd like that," I said carefully, "but things would be different." I explained the boundaries. Plainly, no one person should spend the day in the kitchen, and I had already planned a gathering with friends on Christmas Eve that would not change. There was a pause, and then he answered slowly. "I think we can manage that." His tone held no certainty, but there was no refusal either. When I ended the call, I walked to the wall where the Thanksgiving photo hung. I touched the frame lightly, tracing the edges of our smiling faces. Whatever Christmas would bring, it would arrive on terms I had set. For the first time, I knew I could welcome my parents without losing myself in the process. Christmas arrived quietly, different from any I had known before. My parents drove up the day before, carrying small gifts instead of grocery bags, their voices softer than I remembered. I had told them clearly what the boundaries would be. No one person chained to the kitchen, no elaborate menu meant to impress. And my Christmas Eve with friends would remain untouched. To my surprise, they agreed. That evening, Tessa, Eric, and Theo crowded into my condo, with trays of food laughter filling the corners of every room. Aunt Denise arrived soon after carrying her pies the same way she had at Thanksgiving. My parents sat among them, not in charge, not directing. For once, they blended into the circle instead of standing outside it. We shared simple dishes, roasted vegetables, casseroles, fresh bread, and passed everything around the table. No one asked me to stand. No one expected me to refill glasses without tasting my own meal first. My father carved the turkey with a little help from Eric, and my mother carried plates to the counter without protest. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Later, as candles burned low and the room grew quiet, my mother reached for my hand. "I didn't realize how much we leaned on you," she said softly. My father nodded beside her, his voice steady but low. "We should have seen it sooner." Their words didn't erase the years, but they marked a beginning. I let their hands rest in mine, choosing not to fill the silence with old wounds. When the evening ended, I stood in my doorway watching them leave. Justin's name still lingered on my phone, his messages unanswered, but even that felt lighter now. I didn't need his recognition to know my worth. What mattered was the table I had built, one where everyone carried a part, where no one was invisible. In the weeks that followed, I found myself moving differently through my days. I left work on time instead of stretching late into the night. I joined Tessa for walks after dinner. I planned gatherings with friends where food was shared instead of assigned. The weight that had pressed against me for years slowly lifted. Looking back, I see now that change doesn't come in grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with one small word spoken aloud, a word like no that breaks the pattern. It takes root quietly, and if you give it room, it grows into something strong enough to hold you. Family can still matter, but love without balance is only service dressed up as duty. What I needed all along wasn't their approval. It was permission from myself to be more than what I could provide. If you've ever felt unseen, if you've ever carried more than your share in silence, maybe my story can remind you that it's never too late to step out of the background. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be at the table, not just the one setting it. And now, before we close this chapter together, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from, and what traditions have you made for yourself that truly nourish you? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, I hope you'll join me for the next one.